Who are the best players on the Packers right now at their key positions? And are they the same as the players who will be the best by the end of the year?
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We put out on social a question about who would lead the Packers in sacks, and most people said Rashawn Gary. Okay, that's interesting, but not really, right? Not. There were a couple. I got some Kenny Clarks. There were some Lucas Van Nesses, and that was the one that made me go, wait a second here. There's something interesting to talk about. So I thought at some of the crowded positional groups, so groups where there's a bunch of guys, not like quarterback, like we know who the best quarterback is. Ask the question: which one of these guys is right now the best player, and is he also going to be the best player at the end of the season? And I want to start on offense. The offensive line was one that I really had fun thinking about, because right now the question of who the best player is, to me, is obvious. It's Elgton Jenkins. But do I think Zach Tom could be the best offensive lineman on the Packers by the end of the year? Yes, I do think that that's possible. Do I think that, especially if Elgton Jenkins played center, a possibility we talked about on yesterday's show, that he could be an all-pro caliber center though? Yes, I do. And could Rasheed Walker, who by the end of last year was just locking dudes up, surprise us all and come in off the top rope and be that guy? That doesn't seem that crazy to me either. By the ESPN win rate metrics, he was one of the best left tackles in the league last year in pass protection. So I think this group as a whole is underrated, understanding that there is some potential turnover here. Sean Ryan, John Runyon Jr., that's new. We'll see how the actual line shakes out. But to me, who the best player is right now is Elgton Jenkins. If you told me Zach Tom was the best player at the end of the year, I would go, yeah, that makes sense. But if you told me also that Elgton Jenkins was playing left guard and Zach Tom was playing top, I kind of think that I would pick Zach Tom. But if you told me Elgton Jenkins was playing center, I just think he can be a kick-ass center. I think he can be, like, he's a really good guard. I just think at center, he can be really in a position where there aren't that many good players, or there aren't that many great players. There aren't that many guys like Jason Kelce who can anchor a unit from that spot. I think Elgton Jenkins has the potential to be that. My answer is going to be Elgton Jenkins for right now and Zach Tom by the end of the year. But if you told me right now Elgton Jenkins was going to play center, I kind of think I would change my answer. Before we get to receiver, because that's the most fun. Are we sleeping on tight end? Do we know who, first of all, do we know right now who the best tight end is on the team? Like, it was Luke Musgrave for sure last spring and summer. Going into training camp, everyone, I mean, Matt LaFleur raving about this guy. He just moves differently. And oh my goodness, What is this at 6'6", 250 to be able to run the way that he does? Everyone watching is just like, holy buckets. And then, look, he went out and played well. But then Tucker Kraft comes out in a different style, a bruising, run after catch kind of, more, I think, what we think of as a traditional tight end. He looked really good. He looked really good. This is, to me, really close. I think the answer at this spot is Luke Musgrave and Luke Musgrave. Like, I think he's the best player right now and will be the best player by the end of the year. I think his upside, like, he has the potential to be like a Mark Andrews type. That has been the comp that I've used from day one with him, because his ability to win vertically, to run sail routes and seam routes and threaten vertically as a tight end is pretty unusual. But man, the combination of them is really exciting. It's really exciting. And I think Tucker Kraft has the potential to be a really, really good player. Like this truly has the potential to be the best 1-2 tight end punch in football. That's not hyperbole. That's how talented these guys are. That's how much they showed in limited samples each last year. Tight end is notoriously one of those positions where it's hard to come in right away. I think in year 2, both of them will be better. And I'm really, really excited to see those guys. Receiver is the toughest one, by far. Because the best version of Christian Watson is the best receiver on this team. But we have not seen that consistently. So is he even the best receiver on this team right now? I think the best receiver on the 2024 Green Bay Packers right now is Jayden Reed. He was the guy last year that, through all of the turmoil, the injuries to Christian Watson, some of the Jordan Love up and down play, the injuries to Dontavian Wicks and his, waving in and out of being a featured part of this offense. Jayden Reed was the constant. Set the rookie receiving record for the team. I think he's the best receiver on this team today, right now, as we stand here, in terms of, if you go, hey, over the course of 17 games, if you had to play 17 games right now, which one of these guys do you think is the best? If you had to play a game tomorrow, who do you have the most faith in? And I think my answer is, well, the one game thing maybe muddies the waters a little bit, because I still think that's Christian Watson. And so my answer is Jayden Reed is the best player right now. At the end of the season, I can make a case for Jayden Reed. I can make a case for Christian Watson. I can make a case for Dontavian Wicks. That is the case that a lot of people are making right now. We just heard Greg Cosell recently talk about this Packers offense and going back and watching Jayden Reed and Dontavian Wicks and just kind of being blown away by what they did as rookies in their development. Dontavian Wicks, I have been slightly less optimistic than some on Packers Twitter and some in Packers media about what his upside is. I think he can be a really, really good player. I just think the physical tools with Watson, if he stays healthy, the play that we've seen, we've never seen Dontavian Wicks just take over a game the way that we've seen Christian Watson do it. And so that, to me, that sets him apart. But if you ask me week 1 of this group, who deserves to get the most targets by quality, I would say Jayden Reed. He was someone who, in the middle of last season, by the end of last season, we're going, there's no question about who the wide receiver 1 is. It's Jayden Reed. He's the best receiver. He was the best receiver on the team last year. And yet, Romeo Doubs led the team in red zone targets, in touchdowns, and I haven't even mentioned him. That's the crazy thing about where this receiver room is right now, is with maybe like the exception of Malik Heath. Like, honestly, if Bo Melton pulled a Donald Driver and was just a kick-ass receiver, that's the second time I've said that word in this episode. I don't know why that's on my mind. But if he just went out and had like 1,000-yard season this year because he's catching a 75-yarder once every 2 games and is getting, 8 targets in the other game, like, that would not like floor me. I wouldn't die of surprise if that happened. It seems pretty unlikely. But Wicks, Reed, Watson, Dobbs, if you told me any of them by the end of 2024, that guy is the best receiver on the team, I'd go, seems possible. Seems possible to me. All right, let's do the defensive side of the ball next on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed or power or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. We're going to talk defensive side of the ball here. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. The defensive side of the ball, I wanted to change the parameters a little bit because I just don't think the conversations are as interesting, frankly. Because like if you go defensive line, Kenny Clark is clearly the best player. And I don't even know, like there are worlds in which by the end of next year, Devontae Wyatt or this upcoming season, Devontae Wyatt or Carl Brooks are the best defensive linemen on this team. They don't seem likely. Even like 25, 30% likely. I think the gap between Kenny Clark and everyone else is that big. I think the same is true on the edge where Rashawn Gary is just so much better than Kingsley Enagbare and Lucas Van Ness and Preston Smith that those conversations are not particularly interesting. Jair Alexander, same deal. Like he's just very clearly the best corner. Xavier McKinney is very clearly the best safety. Now the linebacker one is interesting. Who is the best linebacker right now? Can we even comfortably say it's Quay Walker over Isaiah McDuffie? I don't know that we can. So I'm actually going to switch around the parameters here. And we're gonna do what prompted me to create this episode. And I want to do the sack total one. I want to do interceptions. I want to do tackles. So we'll frame it that way. So who is the most likely to lead the team in sacks this year? My answer is Rashawn Gary. Today. Is there someone who by the end of the season could challenge that? I really want to say yes. I think Kenny Clark could because I think this could be a double-digit sack season for him. Heavy three technique season, getting into the backfield, disrupting quarterbacks, getting in those situations one-on-one where you just get to go wreck shop. I think it could be him. And Wyatt, to me, is the wild card here. Because in this defensive system, his ability to win quickly, to get up the field, is what they're going to ask him to do consistently. And so if he came and when you look at last year, the win rates, I mean, all of the underlying metrics said he had a pass rushing season that was one of the best in the league for an interior defensive lineman. He just couldn't finish enough of these plays. He had 5.5 sacks last year. Does that surprise you? Like, doesn't it seem like he had 3? 5.5. That's not a small number. It could have been 10. It really could have. If he'd just finished a couple of them, if he didn't just slip, if he could have just closed down the space a little bit more. He was winning quickly so consistently, creating pressures so consistently, but couldn't finish. If he converts a few more of the pressures to sacks, we're talking about a player who could be a double-digit sack kind of player. But I think, frankly, the favorite in either case is still Rashawn Gary. Now, interceptions is an interesting one because Jair Alexander has really never been a super high interception player. And that was one of the knocks on him early on. It was like, well, he was awesome as a cover corner, but he was not taking the ball away. And that was something that everyone really wanted to see more from him. Last year, Xavier McKinney had 3 interceptions, but he has 9 career interceptions. In 2021, he had 5. That was a career high for him. He's got 3 total the last 2 seasons combined. I think he's the second best defensive back on this team, but is he going to lead the team in interceptions? If Javon Bullard is out there, could he do it? Eric Stokes, his ball skills are also somewhat problematic for him. Could someone like Quay Walker come off the top rope and have 4 and lead the team? That's not out of the question to me. It's not. The easiest answer is Jair. Keyshawn Nixon is a little bit of a dark horse here too. I think he's someone that's going to get more target share this year because if Eric Stokes is healthy, teams are not going to want to throw at him maybe early on, but once if he's healthy, that's not going to be fun. Jair Alexander, that's not going to be fun. So your weakest point may be Keyshawn Nixon, though I think, he's a serviceable nickel corner, certainly a playmaker with the ball in his hands. The interception one's tough. I don't think this is a defense where you're going to expect the safeties to create a lot of interceptions. It's not a coincidence that we see the Fred Warners and the Dre Greenlaws just vacuum up these passes in the middle of the field. I kind of want to get crazy and say it's like if Quay Walker just caught every pass last year that he had in his mitts, he probably would have led the team in interceptions because the Packers just didn't get enough of them. This is just another way of saying they needed more production on the ball. I'm going to say Jair Alexander, but begrudgingly. Begrudgingly. It's not my favorite thing. And then tackles. By the way, don't rule out. And I should have mentioned this earlier. We weren't talking about linebackers, so it didn't hit with me. Don't rule out someone like Edge Cooper leading this team in sacks. Like he just gets home enough as a blitzer where he gets 10, 12 sacks. That's not crazy to me at all. At all. So something to keep an eye on there. Tackles. To me, because I just don't know what's going on, this is tough. Like, who's going to start? Who's going to stay healthy? Because that could be an issue for Isaiah McDuffie or Quay Walker. Who's going to play well enough to stay on the field? I think Edgerrin Cooper, to me, is the most likely player to play the most number of snaps. And so he's my pick. I think he's the guy most likely to lead this team in tackles. Now, if you ask me right now, is he the best linebacker on the team? Probably not. But he's the guy I think is most likely to lead the team in tackles. So we've changed the parameters a little bit. I understand that. But that's something that I thought was worth doing just because it makes the conversation a little bit more interesting, I think. One quick stat here with Devontae Wyatt. So in terms of pressures created, Devonte Wyatt created 48 pressures and got 7, according to PFF, 7 sacks. He really had 5.5. PFF does not do half sacks. That's similar in terms of pressures. Fletcher Cox had 49 total pressures with 140 more pass rush reps. Devonte Wyatt had 1 more pressure than Jeffrey Simmons in 23 fewer pass rush reps. All the other guys that had pressure rates like he did, or had pressure numbers, totals like he did, played a bunch more snaps, with the exception of Jeffrey Simmons, who's one of the 3 best interior defensive linemen, certainly 5 best interior defensive linemen in football. That's remarkable. And if he can just start turning some more of those into sacks, the amount of pressure that this interior with Brooks and Wyatt and Clark and Wooden can create is absolutely off the charts. All right, we're going to finish up here on Locked On Packers. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. I wanted to close with a version of this that is not about starters. It's not about frontline players as of this moment. But as I was going through the offenses, I was thinking about this. Josh Jacobs is the answer for both. He's the best running back right now and is most likely the guy who's going to be the best running back by the end of the year. But of A.J. Dillon and Marshawn Lloyd, who's the best running back right now and who's going to be the best running back by the end of the year? There's so much to be excited about with Lloyd. The explosiveness, the playmaking, creating space where there is none, the ability to work as a pass catcher, that's all there. He's also got a major fumble problem. It's going to be an adjustment in pass protection just from a physicality standpoint, from an understanding protection standpoint. And you know A.J. Dillon is going to stone those guys trying to blitz. Now, has he blown a pass protection assignment in his life? Yes. Did he run better in the second half of last year than the first? Yes. And according to reports out of OTAs, yes, he looks absolutely chiseled out of marble right now, as he always does coming out of the offseason program. He is just built like that. But he looks spry as well. The answer is, I think, A.J. Dillon is the best running back 2 on this team right now. But the obvious answer for who the best running back 2 on this team is going to be by the end of the year is Marshawn Lloyd. And if he hits that ceiling, if he hits his ceiling, I think we might actually be able to have a discussion about who the best running back on this team is. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to make a segment out of this one. Because he is that talented, that explosive, that dynamic with the ball in his hands, that he could be the best running back on this team by the end of the year. And it could be very much like what the Lions have with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, where you have that bell cow back, that guy that's just he does the between the dirty work stuff, and then you have that outside runner, that slasher runner, who can rip off chunks for you. And maybe he only gets 8 carries a game, maybe he only gets 6 carries in a game, but it's 8 carries for 52 yards. Or it's 8 carries for 70 yards because he rips off a 40-yarder in there. And maybe he doesn't get a lot of total touches, but it's 6 carries and 3 catches. And so it's 9 touches. And it's, 80 yards. That's the kind of ability that he has. This is why, Daniel Jeremiah said he was the best running back in the draft. Jim Nagy, Senior Bowl, friend of the show, said he thought Marshawn Lloyd was the best running back in the draft. The Packers got the best running back in the draft. if he lives up to that billing, he can be the best running back on this team. Now, I think Josh Jacobs, as we've talked about, everydayers will remember, we talked about the situation that he comes into is probably the best of his career. Between the offense that he's in, the play caller, the quarterback, the offensive line, the pass catchers around him, the burden that will not be on his shoulders. So I expect a big season from Josh Jacobs. But that's how talented I think Marshawn Lloyd is and how dynamic. I think in order to be an impactful, a differentiating running back in the NFL, I think you have to be able to create explosives. And you have to be able to create explosives kind of by yourself. Like if you're the kind of guy who, if everything's blocked up beautifully, you can rip off a gain. And then with your speed, you can create more. Like that's useful. The Dolphins have proved that. Like Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane, their ability to just like Mike McDaniel not only dials up the perfect call, but it's a beautifully executed and timed call. You catch them in the perfect defense, and there's just no one between you and the end zone. The Dolphins have to lead the league in those. Being able to have the speed to rip those off. Mostert and Achane are two of the fastest running backs in the NFL. That's really useful. But I think we've seen against the best teams in the playoffs, when it matters, that stuff doesn't work. You need guys that can create on their own. And Marshawn Lloyd can do that. And it's frankly what I'd like to see a little bit more of A.J. Dillon. Like that's why the pad level thing is something we've talked about. The breaking tackle stuff. He doesn't play as big as his frame. He just doesn't. And when he does, you go, holy crap. Like there was the run against Seattle 2 years ago. Where it just like bounces off 6 guys and you're just like, oh my God. Like there were a couple of plays like that this year where guys just didn't want to tackle him. And when he plays like that, you're like, what is this? This is crazy. It's just not always there. And I just, the ability to rip off explosive runs or to, in the passing game, create explosives. It's just not there. And I think that is too essential to what you need offensively today. It's one of the reasons why I think Lloyd can be not just the best running back on the Packers. I think he has the ability to be, one of the game changers that we have in the game. Maybe we haven't spent enough time talking about that. I think he can be really good for the Packers. And I think even if Josh Jacobs weren't on the team, the Lloyd-Dillon combo would be really fun. Little thunder and lightning. But they have Josh Jacobs, who's really good. So this running back room is again, much like the receiver room, there isn't that ultra elite guy right now. Josh Jacobs was 2 years ago. But there aren't many teams in the league that can go 3 deep the way that this team can. So we'll let it play out on the field and see who's the best by the end of the year. I don't think it matters because I think they can all play at a high level. I think they can all be at their best in this offense because of the coaching. Matt LaFleur is going to find ways to put them in a position to succeed. He's proven that. This offense is going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. All right, back tomorrow. Much more here on Locked On Packers. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast. Wherever you get podcasts, you can subscribe to Locked On Packers. Social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. You go subscribe on YouTube. All of our shows are on YouTube, so you can stay Locked On Packers.